Hey buddies, welcome back to another themed D&D campaign. Since winter is here and the holidays are around the corner, happy holidays. I am actually wearing my new Dungeon Master ugly sweater. I'm actually really liking this. This was a present from my mom. And because of that, I've decided that today's theme is going to be a Winter-Scape D&D campaign. Now, for those of you new to this channel, here's what happens in this series. I take a theme and then talk about the potential challenges and creatures you might run into, as well as the backgrounds and abilities to prioritize, and the subclasses that best fit that particular theme. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. First of all, I am prioritizing 2014 options over 2024 options, simply because currently there are more 2014 options as opposed to 2024. However, if 2024 has a perfect fitting subclass or background, I will mention it. Thing number 2 to mention is I'm only looking at official books printed by Wizards of the Coast, which means no special homebrew anything. I am not against homebrew. I in fact make my own homebrew stuff. I am trying to get around unnecessary homebrew. The whole point of this is to show what options you have in the base books before you go to want to homebrew things. And third of all, I'm going to prioritize theme over mechanics. If I find something that thematically fits, even if it's not, the best subclass out there, I am going to mention that one. However, if there is a case of a tie, the one that has better mechanics is going to win. With that all being said, let's get into the video. So a Winter-Scape, or a snowpunk fantasy, is a fantasy story that takes place in a world that is in either a perpetual winter, a very long, harsh winter, or has like a tundra-like environment that covers the entirety of the world. Or maybe it just takes place during an ice age. Basically, lots of snow, lots of ice. Most of the time, these worlds are based off the real-life countries of Canada, Norway, Sweden, Germany, Russia, Northern China, Greenland, or anything that really borders the Arctic Circle. So what exactly can you expect out of these environments? Well, for one, everything's cold. For two, everything's covered in snow. 3, there are larger creatures and, tough people around. And 4, even the air is trying to kill you. I'm not kidding. If you go into the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's actually a whole section about the bitter cold. And in the bitter cold, if you do not have the proper gear or any form of, warmth, you will be taking damage just by being outside. With that in mind, the cultures that tend to develop in these kinds of areas tend to be very tough, have a very survival of the fittest mentality, and have kind of a dark, morbid acceptance of death. In addition to all of this, most of the people who run a winter-themed campaign or a winter-themed one-shot also tend to focus on the winter holidays. This includes things like, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Yule, Krampusnacht, and, of course, the winter solstice. With that in mind, I am going to actually draw ideas from these various holidays, as well as, just being able to survive in the tundra-covered snow barren wasteland that you're going to be in this area. This brings us to the abilities you should prioritize when selecting your subclasses. Now, the first ability you should prioritize is anything that gives you resistance and or immunity to cold damage. Most of the creatures you're going to be running into will be dealing cold damage along with whatever, physical attacks that they do. And like I mentioned earlier, the air is trying to kill you. It's like, between, the heavy snowfall and just the bitter chill, anything that allows you to resist the damage done by that is gonna be instrumental in getting through a snowscape. In addition to that, this leads to the second ability to prioritize, is anything that gives you fire damage. Most of the creatures you run into in this kind of area tend to have a vulnerability to fire. Now, of course, there are some that at higher levels that resist fire, but you'll have abilities or something to get through that anyway, so that's besides the point. But because of that, fire damage is one of the best damage types in this particular situation. On top of that, warmth itself is worth more than gold. There are lots of various villagers who will pay you to instantly start a fire with an ability like create bonfire or even fireball itself. Basically, fire damage is a must. The third ability to prioritize is any ability that allows you to get through difficult terrain, between mountains, cliffsides, frozen bodies of water, tundra, blizzards. Basically, if you are not in a town or a village or any form of civilization, it's going to be difficult terrain. You would like to have any form of ability that lets you get through the difficult terrain as normally as possible. When it comes to choosing your skill proficiencies, there's actually a couple you should really prioritize. The first one you should prioritize is the survival skill. Survival is what you use to make shelter, forage for food, and most importantly, make fire. The second skill you should prioritize is the athletic skill. Everything's frozen, everything's difficult terrain. Being proficient with the athletic skill will allow you to traverse a little easier. The third thing is cook's utensils, more specifically if you decide to go the holiday route for this particular theme. And this allows you to make all those wonderful holiday themed treats, like Christmas cookies. Next, we're going to talk about the best backgrounds. I think 2014 has two really good ones, but so does 2024. The two ones that I select for 2014 are the Outlander and the Hermit. The Outlander because these are the people who actually understand what it's like to live in the wilderness. They know how to survive, they know how to hunt, they also know how to homestead, meaning that they are probably the best suited for living out in the frozen wasteland. In contrast, the Hermit is a good option for those who actually want to be like a winter figure. If you go read a lot of stories about people who live in like the harsh winterlands or like even some folk tales about them, you'll find that a lot of them tend to become hermits, kind of like Santa Claus or the Lord of Winter. For 2024, I think the best background options are the Farmer and the Guide, and the reason I think this is because these are the Outlander split into two. The Guide is going to be the background where you understand the wilds of the Winterlands. You understand how to traverse the frozen tundra. You know how to get around in a frosty forest, things like that. Whereas a farmer is going to lean into the homesteading kind of thing. These people have conquered the winter and honestly have started either a strong family or a strong clan. And because of that, I actually think that this is really good for a winter campaign. Plus, the farmer gets the tough feat, which is the perfect thing to have when you are in a place like this. And now we get to the best part of this video where I pick the subclasses that best fit the theme. Let's get to it. As mentioned in previous videos, Artificer only has 4 options. Because of that, I'm selecting Alchemist. And I'm selecting Alchemist for 3 reasons. Reason number 1 is they can learn how to make potions of cold resistance as well as cold immunity. Now, as I mentioned before, this is one of the abilities you want to prioritize because the air is trying to kill you. Second thing is that they can also make potions that do fire damage, including a fireball potion or a potion of fire breathing. Again, fire damage is instrumental to most of the creatures you run into. Third is that flavor-wise, I could see the alchemist making, instead of potions, making things like, baked treats that do these effects that I mentioned before. And because of that, I think it is the perfect fit for a Winter-Scape campaign. So, kind of like the Seafaring campaign, the best barbarian for the Winter-Scape campaign would be the Path of the Storm Herald, but specifically the Tundra version. The reason I say this is that this barbarian literally weaponizes winter. Say that 5 times fast. They grant themselves as well as their allies the ability to resist cold damage, and they get the ability to freeze water so they can walk on it. Honestly, this barbarian is the most winter-based thing I have ever read, which is why it's my selection. For Bard, I have selected the College of Lore. The reason I've selected this is that since these are the bards who actually tell stories with the songs that they sing. Because of that, I actually have more of a lore reason, not a mechanical reason to select it. But these are the bards I imagine sitting by the hearth singing Christmas carols or telling stories to all of their clan while the winter winds are howling outside. And because of this image, I think that this is the most festive and fun form of bard to play during a Winter-Scape campaign. So when I was looking through the subclasses for the cleric, I didn't find anything that I thought was like the most perfect thematically or even mechanically fitting. So this one might be kind of a stretch. For this, I have actually selected the Peace Domain Cleric because 1, it's one of the best healers in all of D&D. Like, these guys heal people by walking around. but also because of the holiday aspect to a Winter-Scape campaign. So, when I think of the Peace Domain, I think of stories like a lot of the stories about Santa Claus, the spirits of the winter solstice, as well as the story of Hanukkah, which if you've never heard before, I would highly recommend looking it up. It's actually really cool. Now, because of that, a lot of the winter holidays are times of peace and goodwill. Thus, I think the Peace Domain is probably the best fitting because it is the one that is most likely to spread that goodwill during the tempestuous storm that's going on outside in the Winterlands. This might be my favorite selection in all of this video, and it's the Circle of the Wildfire Druid, and there's actually a couple reasons for this. As I've mentioned before, having access to fire in this kind of theme is a must. Everything is cold, everything is trying to kill you, and if you have access to fire, you're more likely to survive. These druids not only get access to new fire spells like Burning Hands, Flame Shield, and Flame Strike, but they also get the ability to use their wild shape to summon a little fire elemental to help keep them warm and keep the rest of the party alive. Now, because of this, that already makes them one of the best options. On top of that, their later on abilities make them much better healers than other druids. Because of this, they kind of remind me of a walking hearth, which, in my opinion, would keep everyone alive during a winter storm. Because of that, this has my vote at being the best druid for a Winter-Scape campaign. A little shout out to the Circle of Land Druid because they can actually change what kind of powers they get based on their environment, and because they have an Arctic form, they can get cold resistance. So, they get a shout out. Just the Circle of the Wildfire Druid, it works thematically and it works mechanically. So it's just the perfect pick. So, there isn't really a fighter that I think best thematically fits just on its own. But I do think I found one that could actually work if you're willing to put a small twist on it. I have decided on the Cavalier. So the Cavalier is the mounted combatant fighter. These are the guys who like to be on some sort of mount in order to fight. And what I like to imagine is the fighter on top of something like a winter wolf, a deer, a moose, a woolly mammoth, something that's not just a normal horse. So this kind of gives this feel that they are like the Lord of Winter, or like a snowpunk Santa. Again, not a lot of good options, but I really like the imagination that can go behind this one, so Cavalier's my pick. So, the Monk is actually going to have a more festive decision because I've decided on the Way of Mercy Monk. The Way of Mercy Monk gets a more healing abilities, but also has a sense of gentleness around them, which I really think fits the winter holiday theme aspect that I'm going for here. It might be super corny, but because of their almost generous nature and wanting of spreading goodwill, I think they fit the holiday aspect of the Winter-Scape. And because of that, they get my vote. We're moving on to Paladin, and to be honest, I don't have any great options here. This is one of the few times where I think Homebrew might actually be better. But because I have to make some sort of decision, I'm going with Oath of Devotion, and yes, once again, I'm leading into the winter holiday theme for this. Oath of Devotion paladins tend to have this desire to protect their fellow man and have goodwill towards them, which, of course, fits in with most of the winter holidays. Not my best argument, and to be honest, if you have better ideas, by all means, leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear them, because I was grasping at straws here. Okay, we've made it to Ranger, and I'm just gotta say, just have a Ranger in your party. Let me explain. The Ranger's two main abilities of the favored terrain and the favored enemy, you can actually just utilize and are instrumental for this kind of campaign. Just select the Arctic terrain as your favorite terrain, and maybe pick elementals as your favorite enemy, and you've pretty much covered most of what you're going to be dealing with in a winter landscape. Now, because of that, you can realistically play any subclass of Ranger. But because I have to pick one, I have decided on the Drake Warden. And I have two reasons for this. First of all, the Drake Warden gets a Drake companion, and I want a dragon for Christmas. The second reason is that when you pick whatever kind of Drake you get, you also get resistance to the damage type your Drake produces, which can be cold damage. And because you gain resistance to cold damage, it's actually one of the better fits for the winter landscape. In short, play a ranger, pick Arctic terrain, and give me my dragon for Christmas. The best rogue for a Winter-Scape is a scout. A scout is literally just an outlander or a ranger wrapped up in a rogue package. There are two main reasons for selecting this. The first is that they get better mobility in difficult terrain, which you know is good when everything's covered in snow. The second reason that they're great is because they get either the proficiency or expertise, if you're already proficient in it, in survival, which, as I mentioned before, is incredibly important in a place that has eternal winter. The scout is just the best option for a rogue. Hear me out. Wild magic. Okay, let me explain why I think the wild magic is that a lot of Christmas and holiday themed fantasy stories tend to have a lot of random bullshit when it comes to the Christmas magic. Because of that, I think that the subclass that is literally just random bullshit go is the best fit. And honestly, it would be very entertaining for the first 3 spells, and then it will just get absolutely insane. So like I not a lot of great options. I'm going with this one. So when it comes to the Warlock patron, I actually have a strange, but I think a very fitting pick. And I have selected the Genie patron. The reason I've selected is that there are 2 genies that work really well in a winter landscape. The first one is the Ifriti, the second one is the Marid. The Ifriti give you access to more fire spells as well as just fire damage in general, which is great offensively. The Marid, on the other hand, grants you resistance to cold damage, which is great defensively and good for surviving just in the bitter cold. The other reason I selected this as a whole is because they get an ability called Limited Wish, which you can rework as a Christmas wish, which also fits the theme. Honestly, the Genie is just the best pick, and I like it a lot, so it's what I'm going with. Finally, moving on to Wizard, I have decided on the School of Conjuration Wizard. Conjuration is the magic that allows you to create inanimate objects either out of nothing or even create portals. Now, the inanimate objects could be things like toys that you can use as gifts during the holiday season, or you can use it to create food to have lavish feasts, kind of like what you get at, the solstice, Yule, Christmas, Hanukkah, all the things that, those nice lavish feasts that you get to have. Another reason I think is that this is the one, school of wizardry that allows you to conjure temporary winter gear, which will, help you survive the bitter cold outside. Also, these are also the people who can, conjure portals, which, makes you Santa Claus. So, in other words, I think it's just the best fitting for, both the survival aspect as well as the holiday theme to it. So, it gets my vote. And that is the Winter-Scape D&D campaign builds. If I had to build a party myself, I would highly recommend going with a Circle of the Wildfire Druid, a Path of the Storm Herald Barbarian, specifically its Tundra version, a Scout Rogue, a Conjuration Wizard, and a Drake Warden Ranger. I want a dragon for Christmas. So, thank you all for watching. As extra special thanks to John Menard, not for just being, one of the biggest patrons of this channel, but also for getting me these awesome posters that I'm going to start using from now on. And Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye!